Carl Jung used to say that many people spend their whole lives trying to look like something they never really were. They live as if they are on a stage, smiling when they feel like screaming, agreeing when everything inside them wants to say no. We wake up early, put on the right clothes, use the right tone of voice, and step into a role we were taught to play. And the better we get at playing that role, the farther we drift from who we truly are. Have you ever felt that, even when everything seems fine, there's a strange silence inside, like something is out of place, even though nothing seems wrong? Maybe it's because we are being suffocated by what Jung called the persona. The persona is like a mask we wear to protect ourselves. It helps us get along with others, maintain relationships, and play our social roles. But what happens when we forget that it's just a mask? What happens when we start believing that we are that mask? Jung believed this was one of the greatest dangers to the human soul, confusing social adaptation with true identity. How many times have we said yes when we wanted to say no? How many times have we smiled just to avoid conflict, even when everything in us wanted to walk away? What if we are living a life that was never really ours? What if this image we built of strength, success, friendliness, control is only a shell, and our true self is trapped inside, crying out for freedom? Jung said that ignoring the self is living a false life, a life that pleases others but sickens the soul. And the cost of this is higher than we think. It's this silent price, this invisible cost of being trapped behind the persona, that we're about to explore now. Let's go deep into the root of the problem, to the place where it all begins, and understand why so many intelligent, sensitive, and well-meaning people end up living far away from themselves without even realizing it. There is a kind of prison so elegant that most people don't even realize they're inside it. It has no bars, no doors, and no guards. In fact, it often looks like a compliment, a promotion, or a relationship that seems to work, as long as we keep being who others expect us to be. Carl Jung called this the alienation from the self, a deep disconnection from who we are at our core. And it all begins with the creation of the persona, that social mask we wear to be accepted, understood, and valued. As children, we learn that certain parts of us are welcome and others are dangerous. When we showed anger, maybe we were scolded. When we showed sensitivity, maybe we were laughed at. So we built a more acceptable version of ourselves, one that pleased parents, teachers, classmates, and later, bosses and partners. This version of ourselves, refined over the years, is not fake, but it's limited. It doesn't include the fullness of who we are. And the problem begins when we start believing it defines us completely. It's like owning a house with dozens of rooms, but choosing to live locked in the living room, decorating and redecorating the same space, too afraid to open the other doors. Jung said that the persona is necessary. We can't live without it. We need it to navigate the world, but it was meant to be a bridge, not a home. The danger is that many people build their entire lives on this fragile bridge. The true self, the deep and mysterious part of who we are, doesn't disappear. It only grows quiet, waiting to be heard. And the more we ignore it, the more it starts to speak through symptoms. Anxiety with no clear cause, depression even in the midst of success, emptiness even inside a stable relationship. Jung saw this clearly in his patients, brilliant, admired people, completely disconnected from themselves. The more they performed their ideal role, the further they drifted from their soul. The root of all this lies in a subtle but devastating mistake, confusing adaptation with fulfillment. Being socially accepted is not the same as being whole, and this confusion is reinforced by a culture that rewards performance and overlooks authenticity. We are taught to produce, to please, to achieve, but we are rarely taught to listen to the soul, so we live divided. One part of us smiles at the world, while the other suffers in silence. But can we sustain this split for a lifetime? Or will there come a moment when the self demands to be seen? That's when the inner conflict starts to grow stronger, when the inner signs become harder to ignore. And it's exactly these invisible consequences, quiet but powerful, that we're going to explore now. Because the cost of living trapped behind the persona might be far deeper than we ever imagined. At first, living through the persona seems to work. We gain acceptance, stability, compliments. We manage to fit in. But what looks like a solution slowly begins to reveal itself as a slow-acting poison. Because what is ignored within us doesn't disappear, it just gets repressed. And what is buried in the unconscious, as Jung said, doesn't die. It returns, often disguised as suffering. Have you ever noticed how sometimes you're surrounded by people but still feel completely alone? Have you ever had that strange feeling that you're doing well in all your life roles, as a professional, as a partner, as a son or daughter? And yet, deep down, there's a discomfort, a sadness without a name. This is one of the first invisible consequences of living trapped inside the persona: inner disconnection. We start to lose touch with our true desires. We stop knowing what we genuinely like, what inspires us, what really hurts us. Instead, we follow the script of how things should be, a script written by others. Little by little, this begins to affect even the simplest decisions. We start choosing careers, relationships, and lifestyles that don't reflect who we really are. And still, we keep going, because the fear of disappointing others, the fear of breaking the pattern, feels stronger than the desire to be free. In this process, the self, the deep and whole version of who we are, gets suffocated. And Jung was very clear about this. The repressed self will always find other ways to express itself. Often it does this through psychic suffering, chronic anxiety, persistent feelings of inadequacy, emotional numbness, sudden emotional outbursts, that nagging sense that something is missing, even when everything seems fine on the outside. These aren't just emotional imbalances. They're silent cries from the soul, trying to wake us up. And there's another subtle consequence. We become hostages to how others see us. Since our identity is built on the persona, any criticism or rejection shakes our entire structure. We become fragile, insecure, dependent on approval. That's when cognitive biases start to show up. We begin to distort reality just to keep the persona's image intact. We reject feedback, avoid confrontation, and surround ourselves only with people who reinforce the character we created. We enter a confirmation loop, a bubble where everything needs to prove we're right, even when deep down we know something's wrong. And all of this is culturally reinforced. Modern society specializes in rewarding appearance, efficiency, and control. No one is encouraged to pause and ask, who am I behind all of this? But eventually, that question begins to rise. It shows up in uncomfortable, persistent, sometimes painful ways. It comes when we can no longer ignore the dissatisfaction we feel. And at that point, something begins to awaken. A forgotten but living force, the desire to break free. Because there comes a moment when the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the fear of changing. And that's when the rebellion begins. There comes a moment when something inside us simply refuses to keep pretending. It's as if a voice that's been muffled for years starts to scream. Not with words, but with intense emotions, sudden discomforts, a kind of urgency we can't quite explain. That's the soul calling. And when we begin to listen to that call, we step into a journey that Jung called individuation, the process of becoming who we truly are. But be warned, this process is neither calm nor comfortable. It's not about discovering a new self, but about integrating everything we once rejected. The rebellion against the persona doesn't happen on the stage. It happens behind the scenes, when we choose to face the parts of ourselves we've been hiding. Our anger, our vulnerability, our deepest desires, our shadow. The shadow, according to Jung, is everything we've excluded from our ideal self-image. but it remains alive, quietly influencing our choices, our fears, our impulses. To integrate the shadow is an act of courage. It means recognizing that we are also contradictory, ambiguous, imperfect. And by doing so, we begin to reclaim our wholeness. This is an intimate rebellion, quiet, but deeply transformative. It's not about abandoning everything or becoming someone completely different. It's about aligning our outer life with our inner truth. And it often begins with small gestures, saying no where we always said yes, owning a desire we've always suppressed, expressing an opinion we've avoided out of fear of rejection. These gestures may seem small, but they shake the foundations of the old self. Because every time we choose authenticity, the persona weakens, and the self finds room to breathe. Many people who have gone through this process describe a strange mix of fear and relief. Fear, because stepping out of the role feels like walking without a script. But relief, because we finally feel we're being true to something deeper. Jung gives us the map, but not the shortcuts. He shows us that the path of individuation is made of encounters, with the shadow, with the unconscious, with the symbols and dreams that carry the messages of the soul. It's not a journey of self-improvement. It's a journey of depth. And there are examples, many of them. People who, from the outside, seem to have it all: fame, fortune, stable relationships, but dared to break away from the persona and follow the inner call. Not to isolate themselves, but to live more truthfully. Some wrote books, others changed careers. Some simply learned to speak their truth without fear. But all of them share one thing in common. They began to feel peace, a different kind of peace, one that doesn't depend on circumstances, but on wholeness. This is the kind of peace that starts to emerge when we stop fighting who we are and begin to live in deeper alignment. But there is still something even deeper waiting for us, because after the rebellion comes the revelation, the reunion with what we were created to be, and that's what we're going to talk about next. In the silence that comes after the rebellion, when the dust of old roles begins to settle and the external voices no longer define our worth, something extraordinary happens. It's as if a fog begins to lift, and for the first time we can clearly see what was always there, but we ignored it, denied it, or simply forgot. This is when we rediscover the self. Carl Jung said that the self is not just a true self, but the wholeness of who we are: light and shadow, conscious and unconscious, rational and symbolic. It is the organizing center of the psyche, the inner compass pointing us toward the path of our deepest destiny. When we reconnect with this center, we don't become perfect. We become whole, and this wholeness changes everything. We begin to understand that our pain was not a mistake, but a language, that our conflicts were not obstacles, but bridges, that the masks we wore didn't betray us. They simply showed us where freedom had not yet arrived. The great realization Jung offers us is this: the suffering we experienced by following the persona is the same suffering that pushes us back home. The emptiness, the crisis, the discomfort, all of it is a call. All of it is symbolic language trying to remind us that we came into this world for something much deeper than pleasing, performing, or fitting in. We discover that there is a kind of wealth that can't be bought, and a kind of power that doesn't need to dominate. When we begin to live guided by the self, every choice, every gesture, every encounter gains new meaning. We no longer live to meet expectations. We live to express essence. And that's when something magical happens. What we've always searched for in others, we begin to find within ourselves. The validation that once felt impossible to receive from the outside now rises naturally from within. We no longer need to prove ourselves because we are already fully present in who we are. That's the epiphany. And it doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with silence, with a lighter breath, with a sense that, even without knowing all the roads ahead, we are on the right path. Not because someone told us, but because we feel it. Living this way doesn't separate us from the world. It connects us to it more deeply. It doesn't isolate us. It makes us more available, more compassionate, more human. Because when we stop performing, we begin to truly touch people. So, in the end, the greatest realization is not about discovering a new version of ourselves. It's about deeply remembering who we've always been. Before the fear, before the role, before the demands. And when that happens, life stops being a stage and becomes a temple, a sacred space where we can finally exist, whole, free, and profoundly alive. If this message touched your heart in any way, if it made you reflect, remember who you truly are, or even notice something hidden deep inside, then I lovingly invite you, subscribe to this channel. It helps a lot in spreading reflections that awaken the soul. If you liked this video, leave a like. It's a simple yet powerful way to say, this message was worth it. And if you feel like it, share in the comments. What resonated most with you? What made you stop and think? I'd love to read your experience. And who knows, maybe your words will ignite something in someone else too. We're walking this path together.